Welcome to episode 99 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back with Tim on a lovely, somewhat cloudy Friday here.
It is a little bit cloudy where I am down in New York too, but it's Friday, so why not? So I'm just excited about the weekend coming up, but even more excited about our podcast today. So let me do a couple things. First, I want to give some shout outs. We have a tradition that we started quite some time ago, and I'm continuing it. People reach out to us. They tell us, that they're listening to the podcast. I just want to give them, a big hello. Three people come to mind that reached out in the past week. That's Amory Martin, someone I've worked with in the past. She runs a business called Real Wellness. Maybe we can work together on something in the future. Who knows? She's a listener. Also, Lisa Asbury, who is an IT person who works very heavily in e-commerce and also is a mobile app person. She works with B2B, B2C. Also, Sarah, and I'm going to mess up her last name. I'm going to have to look at Sokolowski. Sarah Sokolowski, who also is a listener, a very recent listener, but she's been having fun listening to us. Shout out to all of you and to everybody else who hears. Just send me a DM, say hi sometime. You could find me on LinkedIn very easily, and I'd be happy to mention your name and tell all your friends to continue listening. So we're very happy to have you. I'm going to pause for one moment so we can insert our sponsor mentions, and then I'm going to throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our guest for today. So let me just pause for a moment. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. And so thank you so much to our sponsors. Isaiah, what episode number is it today?
I know, we're episode 99.
Oh my God, it's 99.
It's not 100, but it does feel like kind of a special episode as well. And I'm excited for our special guest. But before, I want to add one quick thing. So I was at Envision B2B for the first time. And obviously Mark was our previous guest. So really appreciate everything.
Mark Brohan, right?
Mark Brohan, they're really helping accelerate B2B commerce, and Balance was there. So they had all flown in from Israel, our sponsors. So I got to meet a bunch of folks from there. Like they must be exhausted because they're like flying in, flying out. I'm complaining about my 2-hour flight from Boston, and and then Brett was there as well from the B2B e-commerce association, and he flew 16-hour direct flight to LA and
from Australia,
and then on top of that, someone had recognized us from the podcast. I have to look at all the people. I took pictures of their badges, and he recognized us from YouTube actually.
I've heard that now from a couple people, so that's why I want to look really good, and make sure I look really good for everyone.
Our marketing person at Trellis is on leave. She's coming back, and so we'll be ramping up when she's back, because it's been tough without her. But once she's back, we'll hopefully get that back on track. But really excited for our special guest, Ram Venkataraman. I'm trying to say that in the best way I can. CEO of Kibo. You guys have kind of reinvented Kibo, the business, in the last 5 or 6 years, from what I understand. So, Ram, tell us about just yourself and Kibo. For I think a lot of people don't know the whole story.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you, Timothy, for having me here. I wish I was episode number 100, but I'll take 99. Essentially, I'm from India, so cricketers, as you play the game of cricket, 100 is a very special number. So any Indian listeners who here probably follow cricket, a century is always the best number to be at. So I'll take 99. 99 is not bad. So Kibo Commerce. I've been at Kibo since 2018. Kibo is owned by a private equity firm called Vista Private Equity. They're one of the largest software investors and only invest in software. So Kibo was formed in 2016 with a amalgamation or a set of acquisitions, companies like MarketLive, Shopatron, Fiverr, and Baynard, people who've been in the industry long enough. These are fairly large names in B2C e-commerce in the early days, in 2016 or so. And then the idea was kind of to build a unified commerce platform, kind of end-to-end omni-channel capabilities, from a retail perspective or a commerce perspective, in-store, online, point of sale, personalization, so on and so forth, right? So these things are obviously very hard to do, and I bring 5 companies together on a pretty much, 4 or 5 month time period and try to put them together. Usually they don't go as well as you planned it. 2018, I came along as a CTO, Chief Product and Technology Officer, and one of the key things that I had to do was to kind of figure out how to put these things together, right? And as a technologist, and I've been in the industry for a long time as a technologist, as a CTO and CPO, and lots of other industries besides just commerce and payment, I realized, we got to start from scratch. In these things. You can't really build these things, a lot of different tech debt and different platforms. So we picked one of the technology platforms called Mozu, which is a modern commerce platform, microservices based, before this word, Mock really existed, Commerce Tools, Elastic Path, Mozu, they all kind of started around the same time. It was a solid B2C, B2B platform, right? So in 2018, we sunset all the legacy tech stack that we had and rebuilt what we have today, which is e-commerce, order management, and subscription on that core platform in 2018. So we built that in 2018, 2019. We all know what happened in 2020. Commerce dramatically changed, right? It became composable. People weren't buying this as one big stack. B2B e-commerce started taking off along with B2C e-commerce through COVID.
We started our podcast during COVID because honestly, events had died, and we're like, crap, the whole in-person event, business strategy. So what are we going to do with all this time? So we're like, let's launch this podcast.
We had made 2 more acquisitions along the way, Certona and Monetate. So some of your listeners may think of Kibo as a personalization company, right? So we kind of built that up, built a Kibo personalization platform. And then in 22, we divested that. Personalization became a very horizontal story. It was B2C, B2B, commerce, but also got into, finance and mortgages companies and quick service restaurants and cruise lines. And we kind of lost our identity through COVID as to what are we, are you a commerce company or a personalization company, right? So we kind of divested that late last year. That's when I took over as CEO in October 2022. And our primary focus, obviously, going forward is B2C and B2B commerce, primarily around composable commerce. We kind of, if you go to our site, kibocommerce.com, you'll see us position our platform and our technology around a composable story. So we fundamentally believe in terms of how we provide solutions for merchants and for businesses, whether it's B2B or B2C, in a very composable way so they can modernize and digitally transform themselves over a period of time. I'll pause there.
And so the composable world is, I think, new for a lot of people. I mean, I was actually impressed that Envision B2B that there was a lot of the larger companies are already kind of headless and composable. Could you kind of explain a little bit about where you guys see yourselves fitting into that market? You have Commerce Tools, I think, has pushed that narrative pretty well in that space. Then you have Elastic Path you mentioned, and then now you have like Shopify has hydrogen oxygen. It seems like everyone's kind of like moving into this world. So I'm just kind of curious to hear how you see yourselves like fitting into that.
The way we differentiate ourselves in this market is if you step back, right? If you think about composable, it's a set of services that a customer could buy or a SI could use to actually create and compose a solution for a client. So, one of the different ways you think about composing a solve, in the old days, the suites had all these capabilities, right? You could go to Salesforce or IBM or Hybris and buy an e-commerce, OMS, and all of these solutions in one suite, a very monolithic way. The composable story said, okay, how can we buy a set of services from different vendors? So if you're trying to compose a solution, you could buy commerce from one vendor, OMS from another vendor, search from a third vendor, CMS from a fourth, and then literally stitch it all together for a specific customer and trying to build a specific user experience. Where we think about ourselves in that board, we obviously believe in that philosophy. Composable is the way we want to go in the market. But we want to offer more services, again, considering our heritage of where we came from. We knew e-commerce, we knew order management really, really well in 2016 with the acquisitions that we did. We had all the in-house and know-how in the company to actually build those solutions. So we offer a range of services in terms of the breadth. Right, you can buy order sourcing and order routing system from us, enterprise grade inventory service from us. You can buy a fulfillment service from us. You can buy customer call center service from us, including catalog and pricing and promotion. So the way we think of ourselves is we believe in that mission. We offer more services than what a commerce tools would offer.
So you can buy the individual products, essentially, the individual.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as needed. And for people that don't understand, I mean, I think people are generally kind of used to what's called the monolithic or the traditional way of doing things. Everything kind of lives in the platform. What do you see as the value of this for people? It's the flexibility. They can choose best of breed. Or, I mean, a lot of these people already are kind of doing. It's funny because everyone's kind of already doing composable, but they don't realize it because you have Shopify, right, as an example, but then you have 30 apps. So you actually have 30 different solutions, apps tying into your Shopify site. It's kind of like a composable site in theory. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of, that concept is actually.
Unless everything were, all in your Shopify, you're absolutely right. I mean, and just to jump on something Isaiah is asking, I think, the way I talk with people about this is like who shouldn't go composable too soon, right? I think that's kind of a very helpful way to look at it because there are really, of course, you can go one service, and use something that you're offering, right? But people who are very small, under a certain size or a certain number of products or, whatever they're offering is very tight and modest, let's say, maybe it's not for them. Right. Maybe they could just get away with not, thinking about this world. But I think as you get bigger and more complex and you have all these different things that you're up to, there's more of a case you can make as you continue down that path. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Is that valid, do you think?
Yeah, I would also add one more thing to that, Timothy, is that I think the IT organization in a business that wants to go composable needs to have a certain level of sophistication.
Yeah.
Right? If they're not willing to understand, hey, these things are things that we integrate, we own some of these things. And now mock vendors and composable vendors are building pre-built connectors. But the more you buy best of breed, there's always things that break between these connections.
Yeah.
How do you kind of resolve that? How do you work with multiple vendors? It's easy to say one throat to choke in the old days, but this gives you a ton of benefit. Obviously, a big reason to go composable is the pace at which you can innovate. Each of these components innovate at different levels. The person that sells you a cart and checkout may not be the best one who can build a CMS, right? Why buy the CMS from them? Let's buy the CMS from somebody else.
Yeah.
The person who builds a catalog may not be the best at doing search. Let's buy it for somebody else.
I mean, that's generally how the market has played out. Like the commerce platforms generally aren't as good at CMS.
Yeah.
Contentful and these CMS platforms are generally better at CMS because that's all they do, right? And so the search platforms are usually better at search because they only do search and recommendations. And Bloomreach is a good example, I think.
Bloomreach, Algolia, these are all great platforms, right? So that's how we think about it. Is like, hey, listen, what are we good at? We focus on that. We've got tons of relationship with CMS vendors, right? So we think about like, how do I plug into Contentful, Content Stack, Amplience, all the standard. Builder.io is another very popular one that we plug into. So we plug into a lot of different places and then offer the customer a choice, right? Now they can choose to buy more services from us, or they can completely say, I'm going to pick a cart and checkout vendor, and then Kibo, I want just your OMS capabilities or your subscription capabilities. So ultimately it's about choice for customers. Composable delivers that option, right? It delivers choice for clients to say, how do you want to compose?
Let's talk a little bit about OMS, because it seems like you guys have really doubled down on OMS. I mean, order management, I think, is a major part of e-commerce, right? Because a lot of people are like e-commerce, and it's kind of like, what is it really? I think people kind of forget that it's like, well, it's kind of order management, it's kind of cart and checkout, it's kind of payment, it's kind of all these things right that you're mentioning. But I'd say order management is a big piece of it. But what I find is interesting is that people will buy an e-com platform, but then they still need a separate order management solution because the e-com platform itself isn't a great order management solution.
No.
To your point. So that seems to be like an area that you guys have doubled down on. And I think you guys are ranked as a top order management solution in the Forrester Gartner kind of reports as a standalone order management, correct? Right. I think it's
we're ranked number 2 after Manhattan on standalone order management by Forrester. But the way we think about
it, it's a pretty big deal for people that don't understand. I think that's a pretty big deal. Manhattan's been around forever.
Manhattan's been around forever, and I've worked with them a million times, but it's really amazing how many people are working with you now, and I think that's fantastic. It really is.
Yeah.
In where we come from, whether it's B2C or B2B, for us it's about consumer experience or customer experience, right? And we fundamentally believe that order management data, whether it's inventory data, whether it's ATP information in terms of fulfillment time, being able to reserve in cart, whether you're selling a B2B product or a B2C product, being able to search for inventory on the front end, all of that stuff needs a solid OMS engine, right? Accurate fulfillment date. To be able to provide a fulfillment date for somebody, a shopper or a buyer on the front end side, when they're going to get it delivered, right? Be able to pick the best carrier. These are all OMS use cases. And the way we think about it is like, hey, how can we help other e-commerce platforms or our own e-commerce platform, right? Our e-commerce services get so much better at providing those types of experiences with customers, whether it's a shopper or a buyer, right? The classic example, if you go to Ace Hardware, one of our customers, you can see inventory information, OMS information, all the way up on the front end. As soon as you land there, you can find products, hook a store. Does this product exist in the store? Which part of the store does it exist? Can I find that same product in a certain mile radius, right? You inject inventory right up front in that shopping experience, and then that's OMS data, right? It's not necessarily inventory visibility is about OMS. It's less about commerce, right? Commerce thinks about it at an aggregated level. We think about it at every store level, every distribution center level. So that's the way we think.
What about marketplaces as well? I assume that they're also marketplaces, and you have this whole omni-channel thing now, right? And so
that's one thing we actually work with partners, right? Logic Broker is a partner that we work with. Miracle is another partner we work with. So we integrate with other marketplaces versus us providing it. It becomes very difficult on everything.
So, sorry, let me be more clear. Like Amazon, let's say they want to sell on Amazon as well.
We plug into
orders. Okay, so you guys
so our inventory engine, right, is very, very capable of segmenting, right? So you can say, hey, I have X amount of product. I want to segment part on my online. I want to put it in this distribution center. I want to be able to sell this on a channel in Amazon or wherever you want to sell it. Mm-hmm. And then basically wherever the orders come in, it allocates inventory appropriately. So as your audience looks about it, the inventory capability is an extremely important capability as you think about setting up your tech stack for commerce, right? Whether you buy it from one vendor, end vendors, inventory capability. And the other aspect of we think about is order sourcing, order routing. People use a different word, order orchestration. How does the platform know where to allocate inventory in each of these locations, right? And so having very intelligent capabilities there is important.
So I want to interject on something here, because I think this is, before we started recording, we mentioned one of your clients, Ace Hardware, right? So I'm an Ace Hardware customer, so I'm just going to throw this out there to you, right? And then we could dive in on some of this. One of the things I really like, which I'm just going to assume is partly because of you, is the ability, and I pulled this up on my app while we're talking. I just want to make sure I had this. I bought stuff there today, which is so funny because I didn't really think about it, but I did. And you could choose either, you search for your item, right? Ship to store for pickup, delivery from store, right? Ship to home. And it's linked to your rewards account. And so you can actually see like which is the better deal and which is the quicker deal and whatever. it's really great from a consumer perspective. That's B2C, of course, but it is a remarkable, detailed way of doing things that a lot of bigger players out there don't even offer anything like this.
Absolutely.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, but the interesting part is that they do that for B2B also.
Oh,
right?
great.
So
that's great.
It's like, it's not just, Timothy as an individual. I may be a handyman service, maybe a 25-30% handyman service. I have a B2B account. I log in as a B2B user on that same experience. I have different pricing, I have different promotion, I have different fulfillment types that are available for me. So it's the ability, and as businesses mature, B2B and B2C on the same platform is going to be pretty important.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
You cannot hide from
that. I agree. And I think
love
it's a
that.
huge mistake when companies try and do either or, split them up. I mean, there's sometimes there's a reason for maybe doing it in a short-term capacity or launching a little microsite to get something out there. But long-term, from a strategic long-term perspective, I think it's better for companies to try and have one website. Look, can you explain that for what that is for people? Because I think some people don't know.
Yeah, it's about sharing the same catalog, right? I mean, you're sharing the same products. Now you can offer maybe certain products in some channel or maybe in different sizes in B2B versus B2B, but you're selling the same product. So why create two different platforms? You lose your customer profile information across two different platforms. They're going to log in into two different places. You're selling and marketing in two different places. But then the second big piece is your inventory and understanding where the inventory is and how do you optimize that? How do you route these orders coming from B2C and B2B in separate places? So your total cost of ownership significantly increases.
Way down. Integration, you only need generally one ERP integration or, all that kind of stuff, right?
But as you think about it, it's one payment integration, one tax integration, one shipping integration. Integrations add up a lot of costs, right? And so think about vendors.
People are like, oh, it's just an API. It's just an API.
Yes. If you paid me $1 for every time I heard it's an API, I'd be super wealthy today.
Oh my God.
Tell us about that. Yeah. So do you guys feel like because you've gone with this microservices approach, this mock approach, it's made you a stronger integration platform? Because really you're kind of integration first, right? I think that's one of the advantages of
absolutely. You have to think integration first. You have to think about participating in the ecosystem. I think that's another aspect as vendors think about going composable. I mean, I'm not allowed to say I'm mock. We're not a part of the alliance yet, but that concept of being composable is a technical concept, but it has tremendous value for the business because it allows them to rapidly transform at a pace at which they couldn't do in a monolith, right? So for us personally as Kibo, we've worked with a lot of CMS vendors. We're going to work with you'll see an announcement soon on an iPaaS vendor that we're going to work closely with. We're working with Logic Broker. So it opens up a lot of different avenues for us in terms of how we participate in that ecosystem, whether it's tech partners or even SIs. As you think about systems integrators or solution integrators, they can now deploy lots of capabilities in the same platform.
One of the problems we see with B2B is that, there's all this new tech, right? We could get Kibo, we could get Contentful, or we can buy all this new tech, but most of these B2B companies, they're on an old version of SAP S/4HANA or Epicor or these older systems that it's really hard to integrate with. So have you guys found that, a pretty big challenge to getting them kind of modernized or?
Yeah, and that's the whole reason why we are thinking about embedding an iPaaS solution, an integration platform as a service, which has pre-built integrations to ERPs, pre-built integration to other commerce platforms, pre-built integration to different payment systems. So it makes life easy from a time to value perspective. So as we think about it as a business, how do our clients think about time to value? We want to provide the fastest time to value by deploying a capability that is going to improve their total ROI. So as we think about it, is it integration with a legacy Epicor? Is it integration with an SAP? Those are things we want to solve out of the box.
Yeah.
The other thing that we also do is with our SI partners, right? A lot of them will say, hey, listen, I have expertise in NetSuite. Let me go build an integration for you in NetSuite. Again, the idea is how do we rapidly improve time to value for our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is this new iPaaS solution going to be kind of embedded? Is it going to be part of the Kibo license, or?
Yeah, we're going to embed that and make it a choice for customers. Again, some of them may have invested in other iPaaS solutions.
It's kind of like an add-on. It's kind of
an add-on.
Yeah.
It'll make it super easy for them to say, hey, I have got on one side, I know it's Kibo, the other side, here is whatever 100 plus connectors you can pick from. Whatever you're
and now I assume the Kibo side will be easily connected because you'll be
Kibo side will be connected. They'll come out of the box. Kibo side will come out.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's cool. We do a lot of work with iPaaS, so I
think. What do you guys use? Which one do you familiar with, or which one?
We were most familiar with Sligo, so we know Sligo very well. But we've worked with Boomi, we've worked with Workato, we've worked with Jitterbit. Our customers have been on MuleSoft, so we've kind of seen them all. But we started working a lot with Sligo in the early days because they were just so deep into NetSuite, and a lot of our customers run NetSuite. So
absolutely
became the one that we use the most. But they're all very similar, honestly.
They are. I mean, conceptually, that concept has existed for so long.
Yeah. The problem, though, is I think it's another one of those things where it's just an API, but it still takes time to get everything connected, right? It's like, it's more work than I think people think. It's not free.
And that's what we're trying to do. Can we solve for one side?
Yeah.
Because it's our platform, and then hopefully simplify the problem on the other side.
I don't think people realize how valuable that is, or how much time goes into this stuff, right? I mean, some of these things can be tens of thousands of dollars of time, or more even.
Yeah, we've taken that approach with another thing too, right? And analytics is a big problem with most customers reporting analytics. So we embed, Looker, Google's Looker platform as our reporting and analytics platform. People get it for free as our product, right?
So tell me how you guys decide this is a good example of build versus buy, right? I think in general, most B2B companies should probably buy. Like, they probably aren't, sophisticated enough, and they don't have a CTO to build, competitive tech. Although I did talk to a few guys, they had custom ERPs and, at the conference, you see it sometimes, but, I generally advise buying versus building for most companies. But as a tech company, you're obviously your value is what you build, right? When do you decide? I mean, obviously you guys have decided to build the OMS, cart checkout, some of that stuff, but then it sounds like you're kind of embedding or integrating other pre-built solutions. So how do you make that decision?
Yeah, the way it's we obviously look at it from a very standard management philosophy of core versus context, right? If it's core to our business, if that's what identifies us, and that's where we add key differentiations. If I'm a B2B business, right, if that business is to run whatever they're trying to sell to their distributors or manufacturers or consumers, however they're thinking about it, software should not be a reason that they differentiate. So in our mind, as a CTO and CPO in my past life, if there's a technology that already exists, and if I cannot improve that technology for whatever reason, then I'm going to go buy. I'm not going to go build. Now, if there's something I can fundamentally innovate, right, and do something different, or there is a reason we can do something differently in a way. So if you thought about OMS, right, most of these were all monolithic, on-prem platforms that existed mostly. And if you think about 5, 6, 7, 8 years, Manhattan was on-prem, Sterling was on-prem. There was really no other option. Mm-hmm. It made a lot of sense for us to go innovate there because we could do something very unique in a cloud-native way.
And it's core to
e-commerce.
It's also core to e-commerce.
Yeah. And we started doing that. But reporting is it's impossible for us to do better than somebody who's primarily focused on that. So if you think about it that way, it's composable on our end too, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, do I go as a vendor, go build a search engine, or do I go build a CMS that's going to be better than our competition? So it's not only best of breed from a customer perspective or a client perspective, it's also best of breed from an engineering perspective. Should we invest in those areas? And most cases, we can tell the customer, here is data, you go buy a Looker or a Power BI and build it. It's for ease of consumption of the platform, we embedded it inside.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think a lot of our listeners often struggle with is trying to figure out, and this ties in again with part of the conversation you just had about, build versus buy, and who's going to actually do these things. And then they look at their own internal resources and they're like, well, I don't know if I have the right resources. I don't know if I have the right, remote, offshore partner, like whoever these folks are who are going to be involved. And I'll give you a quick, example here. There's a client I'm working with, and they're a rather large company. They're international, and they've slowly been getting rid of and moving, to partners almost all of their like IT tech resources, right? And it's a very interesting, kind of troubling thing in some ways. So, I want to say to them, please stop now. Please keep some of these, quality people, because, as you try to, do all of the things that we're talking about here, you don't necessarily want to be going to, the most remotely associated people to your business to handle this. So, again, it's sort of an open conversation and a question, but how do you handle that with a very large company where they're saying this is where we're cutting costs, we're moving things out, but then they still want to, innovate and keep updating their tech on a regular basis?
Yeah, it comes to that discussion. Is that core to their business? Do they think they can beat their competition by investing in that, right? If it's like me too with the competition, or the competition can buy something quicker and kind of beat them, then they should go buy too. They shouldn't go build.
Yeah, and what kind of resources do you offer, or do you offer them through partners for people who are very light, right?
Yeah, so we went through the same, internal process like 6-8 months ago, right? We used to do pretty much all our implementations for customers, right? And it is a fascinating thing to do, but as we thought about growing our business, we wanted to bring the SI community into fold to kind of help us grow the business.
Sure.
Obviously, it's a symbiotic relationship with them, right? But we always said, okay, listen, we're going to be the product experts. We're going to have core people in our organization that enable and work with our partners so that they're successful, right? We didn't go down to zero on our professional services group. We maintained a core team there so that the partner can work with our client. They can get the help, but Kibo is always there.
Yeah,
Kibo is always there from a PS side, from a support side, from a success side.
You get a little bit of both. Because you guys had to do so much services, do you feel, what's the level of internal team? We're obviously a services company in Trellis, and we've seen big differences in great teams and less mature teams. And, we have to kind of operate a little differently depending on the capabilities of their team. What do you think is, there's no one size fits all, right? But at least what level of sophistication do you think the internal team needs to do composable, to do headless? My general feeling is they need at least someone with some technical expertise. You can't just throw on an e-com marketing manager guy who knows Google Ads and say,
"Can I just ask ChatGPT how to do it? Can I just do that?"
And I'm sure you've seen this, right? Where people they get the buzzword and they want to go buy headless, but they're like just not really ready for it, right? And so what would you recommend at like a base level, like the core components for them to be ready from a team perspective?
Yeah, before I go there, I think I've asked a lot of CIOs, if you're not careful, you're going to get into the software business, right? So do you really want to get into the software business by doing like an absolute best of breed? I'm going to buy the cart from this person. I'm going to bring catalog from here and promotion from here. And you're going to stitch it all together. You're going to own the vendor relationships and you're going to actually deploy this, right? So the key question I would ask themselves is first, do you really want to get into the software business, and how you pick these pieces is important. So if they don't have a CTO, CIO that can think like that, then I would think it's not the best approach for them to go down.
Really? Okay. So you're that serious about this, where you think, hey, they really need a technology leader. If they don't have that, they should be, they're not serious about this then. They're
not serious about it. Like, I think that's one of the conversations we actually have early on in the conversation. Like, oh, you want to go composable and you want to fully compose. So there's one thing to say, I want to buy pre-composed solves from a vendor, to say, okay, I still want to believe in a composable architecture, but I want stuff pre-composed for me. Those are things we actually have good success with customers to say, hey, here is a future-proof platform that maybe you rip out certain pieces from Kibo and put something else in there, but you want to take a first step into it. Maybe you should talk to Kibo, because we've composed a lot of these things
and they can buy more of it, so it's less distributed, or they can buy pieces. You know, you can buy varying degrees of it, right? Like you could have composable with only like 2 solutions versus like 10, right? You know, like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they're saying, okay, I want to buy modern architecture, let's say I want to use any of my names, right? I want to buy commerce tools for e-commerce, and I want to put Fluent Commerce for OMS. Both are really good modern tech stacks,
Sure,
right? But they're buying 2 pieces versus I'm going to pick 8 pieces out of Fluent from 8 different vendors and 4 pieces of commerce tools from 4 different vendors. So how composable you make and how granular you make, that's fundamentally a decision that the CIO and CTO needs to take. The more granular you get, the more technically advanced the team needs to be.
That makes a lot of sense. And how often do you have these conversations and they're just like, oh crap, we didn't
all the time. All the time. It's like, hey, listen, who arbitrates the fight between the 2 vendors? It's always going to happen. It does this, right? It's the commerce platform's fault. It's the ERP's fault. It's the OMS's fault. Right? And
they're always going to blame someone. They're going to blame the vendor, the SI.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I understand these problems happen, but the more pieces you have, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah.
And that's the part it's not for everybody. Pure composable is not for everybody.
So what are the typical size businesses that you feel like, and I know it's not, once again, it's not one size fits all, but a little tiny $1 million retailer, they're probably just on Shopify, right? Like I think we all agree that, you're doing $2 million. It's like, just go to Shopify. Like everyone kind of knows that's the.
If we look at it.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the complexity, right? We ask the questions on complexity, like, hey, how many locations do you have where you stack inventory? What's the number of items you have in your SKU, right? What's that business model complexity? Now, everybody thinks that their business model is complex, right? I think that's the nature of it. But so we actually think about and ask these certain questions that tells us, hey, does this opportunity make sense for us? Is this a client a good fit for us before we go down, right? We have, most vendors have, ideal customer profiles in terms of what your ideal customer looks like, right? And for us, it's like we look for inventory complexity, we look for inventory velocity, we look for number of SKUs, number of locations. We try to look at it from different angles before we say, hey, listen, maybe you're not the right fit for us.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's smart. And do you feel like because you guys have a long-term financial partner, you're able to take kind of a long-term view with these customers and not, I feel like, I'll be honest, I feel like a lot of software companies, they just try and get every sale they can get, you know what I mean? And they're just selling everything, even if maybe it's not the best fit,
Yeah. And for me, I feel very lucky about the financial sponsor we have, right? So Vista, PE-backed businesses are not very different than VC-backed businesses, right? Growth at all cost is not our philosophy. We fundamentally believe in profitable growth. Right, so we take the steps, and then we'll be there for the long run. Where you might see vendors disappear or get rapidly acquired. Right, you never know how those things are going to end.
So let's talk about long run, and these are the kinds of questions we occasionally ask in the podcast. I've had a long career in e-commerce. I started in it in 1999, right? So you know how many changes have come along, and sometimes a burst or an explosion of change, and sometimes it's gradual. It's very hard to predict, but what sort of things do you see, if anything, let's say 3 to 5 years down the road? I'm not saying 20 years, right? Like that'll be hard to guess, but maybe even 3 to 5 years, you think, in e-commerce, particularly.
Yeah, for us, I think hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm using the buzzword of the mark. We've been focusing on machine learning for a while now, right? Yeah. In terms of, and we feel there are certain areas that we can do a good job in, right? In terms of what we do. And there's obviously a lot of buzz around generative AI, right? As we think from a tech perspective, there's going to be a lot of consumer preferences and changes is constantly going to push e-commerce.
Of course.
Right? That's the fundamental thing that is causing these changes. What you saw with Ace Hardware and all those different fulfillment types, being able to create an order where things show up in your house, you can pick up. That's all consumer preferences. COVID accelerated that, and I think that's going to continue to change, right? From our perspective, it is like how much more automated and can commerce get, right? I think there's still so much opportunity to optimize commerce in a way that, the cost of running a commerce platform for a business, whether it's a B2C or B2B, can be reduced, right? So, we're going to spend a lot of time innovating and investing in forecasting from an inventory perspective, understanding demand online and tying that to predicting inventory velocity, routing decisions that we're going to make heavily around it. Right? That's one area where we feel like we can spend a lot of dollars from an innovation perspective. Hasn't been solved well in the market, and then we feel like we can invest in that area. The other area is that product discovery. There's lots of people working on that, right? Being able to solve those use cases very intelligently. We're actually going to announce a product here in a couple of months. And then the other part is this current buzzword of ChatGPT and generative AI is there an option to take our data and make better consumer experiences for customers as well as maybe even call center, right? So those are, I think, big things that I think are going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. But I think the consumers are going to drive most of these things. It's going to be less about I think how companies think about it on the
I think you're right. I mean, consumers, end up driving, a lot of the changes that I've seen over recent years, especially. And right now, you look at everything in machine learning and generative AI, and really that's the direction. You just mentioned like, call center, customer service type stuff. There's someone I'm working with, and they're re-scripting everything using generative AI to test it out on actual humans, right? And then see if it works better, right? Like it's sort of an interesting back and forth approach. It's like, we'll see if we can re-script and then test and then pull it back and then re-script again. But I think in the end it'll help because it'll say, is there a better way to do X? And how do we ask, that question in the right way?
Absolutely. I don't have an apocalyptic view of AI or machine learning like a lot of people do, but I think it's going to really help us get more efficient a lot of things. And some of these things have been around for a long enough time. It's just gotten improved better over time. And
absolutely.
Some of it's just improving the basics, right? Just better search, better recommendations, better order routing, right? Maybe you don't have to think all the time and it just auto routes. One thing that I noticed that you guys offer that I think is actually underlooked in the ecosystem, they sound simple, but actually we see a lot of challenges with them. Can you talk a little bit about, I think you guys have a pricing and promotions engine, and then you also have subscription built in. Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize if you want to do subscription with, Shopify, Adobe Commerce, BigCommerce, I'm not sure about Commerce Tools, but generally these are third-party apps and they're not built into the core platform. So can you tell us a little bit about those two areas? We see some gaps, and I'm just curious what your investment has been in them. So
we started down this through a customer of ours, Alchemy. You might be familiar with the word Proactive. They've been around a long time. I think of them as probably one of the founders of the subscription business model, even before there's a website, right? They would sell you, in 1999, whether it's an acne treatment solution. So they're a customer.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely know them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they kind of started this concept. They wanted to kind of have commerce and subscription and OMS on the same platform, although they don't have any stores, but they have a lot of drop shippers that they fulfill their orders from. So we started thinking about it as to why we got on this path. And the primary path was we felt like, again, a business model perspective, most of the competition out there, when they add, it's a GMV take, right? You take a percentage of the actual sale, and that gets quite expensive for brands, retailers. You'd be shocked at how many B2B businesses have subscription types of business. It's repeat orders in there.
It makes a lot of sense. Reorder, I need the same paper towels every day at the office or whatever.
Absolutely. It's not like there's no end date to those subscriptions. I mean, you'll be farm feed. There's like use cases that we run into where people send farm feed, once a month they drop feed down, and that's a recurring order. Right. Yeah. So that's where we started down this path of like, if you have all these other pieces, it's a matter of how can we recreate a order back again into the system and then let it flow through the OMS, right? So it was like a template of an order that would get recreated. It was a very simple idea, and it's gone from there, and it's worked out really well for us because now we offer that as a differentiator for our customers. It leverages the same catalog, it leverages the same pricing promotion, it leverages the same OMS capabilities, inventory capabilities, and then we can get into a lot of interesting use cases because we now understand inventory. We can start predicting, hey, based on this subscription that is coming this month, you need inventory in these locations, right? Or you're probably not going to be able to fulfill those orders. So it becomes there's lots of interesting niches that we can solve use cases for a customer because we offer multiple services. Yeah. The pricing and promotion engine is where I think we ourselves don't do a great job of talking to it. If you talk to look at Forrester and Gartner reports, they rank our pricing promotion really, really high. And it started off on the commerce side, but we have enhanced it very, very significantly, all the way also for subscription. So you want to say, I want to offer a discount for the 5th order. You can say that on our subscription. Or you want to say, I want to offer it for a promotion for a trial subscription, but not for the one-time buy subscription. Yeah. So it's all these edge cases we solve for.
We see problems with stacked promotions where if you want to have 3 promotions of the same one can be an issue sometimes.
Segments, there's lots of use cases. It's very powerful and the beauty about it is that it doesn't need a developer, right? It's all business user friendly. So one of the things as we think about Kibo, we straddle this fence. Yes, we are composable. Yes, it's very sophisticated from an API perspective, but how do you support business users? Ultimately, they have to be taken care of too. Can they go build, and configure the platform very easily? So we kind of straddle both sides of the world quite well.
So as you guys go deeper into B2B and B2C, like how do you see that? How do you see the go-to-market of that, with this kind of composable future? Obviously, you're talking to CIOs, CTOs, it's a crowded market, right? I mean, we, as an agency, sometimes we struggle, there's so many people that, say they do what we do. I'm sure you
absolutely
as well.
the neat part of it is we don't primarily focus on just the commerce aspect. We think from an OMS aspect. OMS has got so many use cases in B2B too. If you're a distributor and you got 10 locations, you need an OMS, right? That's not a crowded market. For us, it's a very, there's only a few players in that place who can really participate in a strong B2C and a B2B kind of situation, right? It's Manhattan, it's, there are up-and-comers and Fluent and Blue Yonder, it's Kibo. It's not a lot of options out there because it's a hard problem. B2B, OMS is a hard problem to solve, especially when it comes to routing, sourcing, providing the visibility into why you did that, why did you pick that. Inventory is fast moving, right? So you got to be able to provide the tooling for the business user to know why you made those decisions. So we do that really well in the platform, and we've done that over many, many years. So when we think about go-to-market perspective, we try to, again, back to the complexity question, is there a good solid fit for OMS? Is there a good solid fit for subscription, along with our commerce capability? If the business says, hey, listen, I'm going to use everything on an ERP, I just want a cart and checkout, maybe Kibo is not the best fit for them, right? I think that's how we think about it. But from a go-to-market perspective, we place a significant amount of emphasis on OMS capabilities and not just commerce capabilities.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's actually a less crowded market. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. When would someone want OMS? So this is where B2B, I think it's a little confusing and complicated. Is most B2B companies, they're deep into NetSuite or whatever, their legacy ERP, maybe they're upgraded to the cloud, but maybe they're not.
Yeah, so if you think about it, right, most ERPs cannot take web traffic. They're just not built.
No, definitely not. Yes.
And so you're going to build a lot of layers on top of it, right? So if you want inventory visibility, you can still maintain the source of truth in the ERP, right? But where we come in is that, hey, because that's what we did for retail and commerce on the B2C side. There's Black Friday events and ERPs can't take that load, right? Yeah. So if you want to have that scalability and sophistication, you bring your inventory visibility out, right? From the ERP into a standalone enterprise grade microservice that allows you to segment that inventory in lots of different ways and all their selling channels that they may have, whether it's a marketplace, whether it's a your store. And so you bring that, you create a very clear facade on top of ERP. ERP still has all of those capabilities where it's the source of truth. Then you put your sourcing and routing rules on top of the inventory system to say, okay, now let this make the decision where you need to source the order from. And then you think about the OMS on the order, it becomes one common entry point where all your orders from different channels come in. The routing engine and the sourcing engine figures out where to allocate inventory. And then you take the order and ship it back to the ERP for fulfillment.
Yeah, ERP is definitely not also well designed for selling on Amazon and selling on store, pick up in store, all the different ways that, the omni-channel.
Yeah. And then as you think about it, right, this is the thing we do for commerce too and retail. Then you want to sell future inventory, right? Why do you lose a sale? You got somebody on a site, right, who's ready to buy, and then you say you're out of stock, when that product's probably on a truck somewhere or it's on a ship somewhere. Maybe it's coming in B2B. People can wait for a month sometimes. Like I can fulfill it in a month. Would you want to buy now? Right? So your inventory service or capability should be able to talk about future inventory. What's in transit? Can I accurately predict a fulfillment date for that product that is coming? Right? So those are types of user experience. Again, I keep talking about OMS, but OMS drives customer experience on the front end and not the ability to lose a sale. Like in commerce, I'm trying to buy a refrigerator online. That's probably $1,000 sale. If I'm out of stock,
I have an Airbnb business at least
$1,000
at least.
It's been a long time since I bought a refrigerator. Maybe
it's more than you think. It's at least that's a cheap one.
Right? So why lose the sale? So can I bring that purchase order that is there in my ERP, expose that to the inventory system in an OMS, and then bring that information all the way to the front end? Those are the powerful use cases that a strong OMS can solve and then deliver amazing customer experience.
Yeah, and one thing that you brought up that's kind of interesting about that is that so I was recently working with a client, and they're an apparel business. They manufacture, and it's B2B, B2C, and they made a mistake, right? They made a mistake, and part of it was because of the way their system worked. What they did is they said, we're ready to release X on this date, and here it is. It didn't make it for that date. And then, but they had already prepared for it and people were ready to buy it. And it was like this huge nightmare. Really, if they had, the kind of system in place where they could track exactly where something was and where it was coming in and when the availability would be for real, as opposed to guessing it, they wouldn't have had this, I'll say nightmare is probably a small nightmare, but this issue that they had to deal with, in so many ways. I mean, their salespeople had to be involved. They had to talk to retailers. They had to talk to, you name it, because they said, here it is, and then it wasn't there.
Yeah,
this is actually a really common problem that people are asking us to do more, which is how, and I'm sure you agree that how talk about how important it is to have delivery dates on the product page. Like Home Depot, I think, is probably one of the best right now. They're one of the better ones. I think when you look at a product, it's we can get it this date. You can go to the store. You have a million options of when you get it.
Absolutely.
And so.
Absolutely. Accurate fulfillment date is probably another place where machine learning will have a big impact, right? Today, they're a little more naive in terms of how they're calculated, and we've got a pretty good engine, but I would still say it's not the most sophisticated engine. But accurate fulfillment data is a great example. If you go to Ace Hardware, right, you can say, hey, if you can go to this store and get it on this date, you can go to this store and get it on this date. So you can, if your product in your store is not available, you can pick the product up in another store and it'll accurately tell you when you can available with that transfer coming from an RSC or
delivery days for commerce.
So it's to me that's the ultimate aspect of why you have a commerce site. Because if everything was always available, especially with all these supply chain issues that are there, and that obviously gotten better significantly since then. Sure. But to be able to, when people are getting into just-in-time inventory again, back again, without this massive restocking that they did, right? They're going to not have inventory available, but to be able to predict and clearly tell them, hey, it'll be available on this date with multiple fulfillment choices. I can deliver it, you can come pick it up, or I can transfer it from this store, you can go to this store or this location. All of those use cases need to be available.
Yeah. And I think that people don't understand on the product page, because you're making decisions before you even get to cart and checkout. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize you need this functionality. You need to be able to estimate these things before they put in their location or their, I mean, you sometimes you can choose, they might geolocate.
Geolocate you.
Like, yeah. But
that's an OMS capability, right? It seems like it's a commerce capability, but that's an OMS capability.
Yeah.
And that's why I think people forget that e-commerce isn't just like cart and checkout or like product page. It's so much more complicated, right? It's logistics, it's shipping, it's routing. I think that's what
checkout is just a tip of the iceberg, right? A lot of the magic happens below that.
Yeah.
A lot of magic happens. I like that. I'm always about the magic, right? That's really good.
Well, we're usually try and keep this to about an hour, so we're not quite Joe Rogan. It's a 3-hour podcast, and
that's an all-day affair. If you're Joe Rogan, it's like an 8-hour podcast.
I actually listened to a full episode once because I had a 3-hour drive, and that was like the one time I ever made it from like start to finish. Like I've only made it like half an hour to Joe Rogan episode. That was the first time I did the full 3 hours. But could you leave us with some kind of advice or summary for people that are kind of trying to learn how to accelerate B2B e-commerce? What are some of the tips that you might?
The advice can be go to Kibo. Part of the advice.
That would be advice number 1. Go to KiboCommerce.com. But I would say advice number 2 and 3 maybe is like, I think you really have to think about the tech stack, right? In terms of the right approaches and how you build it. Think very carefully about composable. Is it the right thing for you as a business? Does your business demand that from a capability? If you're small enough, pick a platform that makes sense. I'm no problem saying go pick Shopify Plus, go pick BigCommerce. It may not make sense for you to go look for some of the larger players out there or try to compose it yourself. And if you're trying to go from a legacy platform, please go bit by bit. Don't try to do a big bang. It doesn't work usually. Go take, and we didn't get a chance to talk about incremental modernization is the only way out if you're replacing a legacy platform with a modern approach, right? The time to value has to be rather quick. You can't sit in a gestation period for 18 months. And then
how would you do that though? Would they build a little piece headless to?
Yeah. So, it depends on where they start with. They could start with the cart and checkout aspect. They could start with the search aspect. They could start with just the inventory aspect. There's just so many different ways, right? And that's why I think it's important to really have the right technical mind in that business so that you can have these conversations with the vendor and the SI to say, where do you start with? We've had customers who just bought cart and checkout and says, I'm just going to replace, I feel good about my other stuff. I just want to replace cart and checkout, right? Yeah. The vendors say, just give me inventory visibility and give me reservations in the inventory service. So there's lots of different ways to skin that cat. There's no one way. It kind of fits what the customer is. We've got some best practices in terms of what we've seen in the market, but that incremental modernization is the only way out.
If you're going this is a really good time to reevaluate your tech stack, decide, am I ready for composable or headless? In my opinion, they're kind of, it's a similar buzzword. It confuses everyone, but or pick the right, monolith, I guess is the other word. But this is the time to kind of figure that out, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's always the time. I want to always say this too, because we've talked about this from so many weird, crazy angles, I think, at this point. It's always the time to evaluate, right? Because I think one of the biggest lessons I learned recently is that, I talked with a client and they said at the end of, we had an 18-month project and they're like, well, we're done now. I'm like, well, you're not done, right? You have to just continue to ask these questions and to talk about what happens in the next 18 months and the next 18 and the next 18. so that I think is also a lesson that we can all agree on. You just got to keep going.
It's never over, right?
Never over.
Somebody at the conference, and it took them 4 years to migrate their ERP. 4 years. They're on a very old ERP. It took them 4 years to get to a new ERP.
My hair will be all white by then. All white.
That's a perspective.
No hair. Expect me.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a stressful project for the meeting.
Yeah, that would be quite something. Ram, it is so wonderful to have you as a guest today. So Ram Venkataraman.
Perfect.
All right.
You got it right.
CEO of Kibo, and it's so wonderful having episode 99. I wish we had maybe made it to 100 for this, but it's wonderful to have you today.
Thank you so much, Timothy. Thank you, Isaiah. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Thank you.